what's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of
The Grand Chancellor,
with.
Mike D'Elia.
I'm Amber Bushels. I'm today's producer of the show. All right, Mike, what's today's topic?
Well, I have nothing prepared, so I'm just going to spitball.
Okay.
I've been looking a lot more into mythology, even like fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting subject once you get down to it, especially in regards to, well, they humanize their gods in a way that sort of is representative of the human condition. But, I mean, all misogyny aside, they're very interesting. And I say misogyny because the myth of Pandora. So Pandora was an invention of the Olympians to punish the Titan Prometheus.
For giving fire to the humans, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, Pandora eventually evolved into being a major punishment for humans as well. The concept of Pandora's box. And
so with mythology and like creation of Pandora's box, Pan's Labyrinth. Oh no, that's a movie. Never mind. Pan's Labyrinth.
no, it was a great movie.
Great movie. But
of course, you understood it better because you speak Spanish.
No, I watched it when I was super young. Actually, which was horrible. There was
that must have been traumatic.
Oh, 100%. You have no idea. Jesus Christ. So we have Pandora's box from Greek mythology. You have the heart and feather from Egyptian mythology. You even have stuff from Chinese culture with the story of Son Goku and everything, his travels.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we have all these old tales of heroes, triumphs? Do you think that modern day has mythologies at all, even though we don't idolize any gods? Or do you think that's over?
I'd say that we've gone so far into the world of skepticism that there's basically, well, this sort of brings into the question Walt Disney, his intentions that would restore the idea of a more magical world around us. That we've delved so deep into atheistic skepticism that we've lost sight of the aspect of the spiritual. I mean, what would you say?
I would say that our mythology has transformed. I think comic books are the new source of mythology and mythology telling. Now we have these stories of
things like Black Mirror.
Exactly. I feel like these are specifically the comic book industry and media are the new source of foretelling new stories of heroes and champions and falls of even these quote unquote gods of these worlds inside these books.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it helps. We can tell that most most mythologies back then were used as a storytelling device to pretty much paint a picture of human society or human nature. Like Adam and Eve, or
the general idea of archetypes. Your standard prince faces off against a fire-breathing dragon.
The champion's arc.
I mean, if you listen to Jordan Peterson, the fire-breathing dragon could translate into the idea of the male libido, but that's a completely different subject, especially if you look at the original Grimm's fairy tales.
So I feel like people like Superman, Spider-Man, the Green Lanterns, these are the new mythos that we're building for this new, more modern, contemporary source of mythology. And who knows, maybe in 1,000 years, people will be digging up comic books and such. You're like, wow, look at these superhumans that used to live among the earth, or these gods that used to rule. Whatever happened to them?
Well, I'd say that the concept of the superhero doesn't exactly translate into a parallel to the mythology.
Why would you say that?
Because there's something missing.
Which is?
I had it, but I lost it.
You have your hero, you have your damsel in distress, you have your climactic moments, you have your lesson learned, you have your gods, the world building. The reason is there. Either it be a traumatic event or...
That is true. But at the same time, there's an element of realism to the original stories. Everything in... I could say Guardians of the Galaxy is more closer to the older myths because there's a concept of the unknown.
Yes.
Whereas everything else is basically known. You have a man who builds a suit and flies everywhere, kicks the living crap out of his dad's old business partner, but it doesn't exactly dig as deep as one would expect the story of Perseus.
Well, that's looking at the movies. If you look deep in the comic books, maybe there is more. Because, like you said, there's a sense of realism, but can you argue, like, Olympian gods, these magical creatures, isn't that so far different from, like, the comic books from their gods, their own magical creatures, and a sense of realism, like, kind of being corny now, like, with great power comes great responsibility sense, or, like, with, like, X-Men, it's all about, like, accepting people who are different from you, so, like, there are these real messages and like ideas. It's just embedded differently. I feel like differently from the from myths standpoints.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from on that, but in a lot of comic books, the sort of moral of the story isn't exactly always evident.
Yeah, it's usually discovered later.
Yeah, but I mean, you could look at a completely. I mean, let's take the story. You probably never heard of this one, Bellerophon.
Okay.
He was a regular, ordinary guy who wound up single-handedly destroying an army. Mm-hmm. Well, 2 armies, the Amazons and another one I can't remember, and this ferocious beast called the Chimera, which had...
Oh, no, Chimeras, yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of it all, the king bows down to him and hails him as the son of Poseidon. And that sort of goes to his head eventually. I'm leaving some parts out. But at the end of it all, it goes to his head, and he believes that he belongs on Mount Olympus. So he rides Pegasus all the way to the top of Mount Olympus. Zeus sees him and deploys a gadfly. Mm-hmm. And that's able to buck Bellerophon off of Pegasus, and he lands in a thorn bush. That is a sort of that's one of my favorite myths, and the behind that is don't let your pride blind you to what actually is. So that sort of element is sort of in line with the concept of great power comes great responsibility. But at the same time, it doesn't. It also comes into play the idea of know your place. Mm-hmm. Aristotle, he said the best thing for a person to know is what they're good at, what their function is, and then they'll be happy. Like what's their position in the clock of the big picture.
But isn't sometimes our placement in the world not what we want? And if we can break the limit, why not try breaking it? Why not try to prove these higher ups that we could be better than them, or if not better than ourselves?
Well, at the same time, Bellerophon didn't like his place either. He had just prior to he had just murdered his brother by accident.
Happens to the best of us, yeah.
And accused. I mean, you know the story of Joseph the Dream Teller, correct?
No, I actually don't.
From the Bible, from.
Okay. I'm gonna be serious. Like, I didn't read the Bible that much, but I think I know the story. I'm pretty sure I remember it. Was that with Morpheus and everything?
Orpheus was a completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
Orpheus was Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah, I'm thinking of different things. Yeah.
So it sort of mirrors that story of Jacob the Dream Teller in that the queen sort of tries to get into bed with Joseph, or in this case Bellerophon, and when he denies her, she tells the king that he was getting too handsy. And I don't want to use the R word here. Mm-hmm. And at the end of it all, he achieves greatness despite, Joseph managed to enter into Pharaoh's court and become one of his servants, and Bellerophon proved himself a mighty warrior. So it is it's not deterring anybody from choosing greatness. Rather, it's don't let the power go to your head.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, any other thoughts?
Well, it was an earlier a point you made. I can't remember what it was, but it was like it reminded me of a comic series I love reading. It's on hiatus right now. It's called Saga, and it's like pretty much almost like a Romeo and Juliet. It's a warring between two galactic empires, and it's two soldiers from the two different sides who are like completely supremely different from each other. They fall in love. They have like pretty much like a cursed child, not a cursed child, but it's called a curse. It's not called a cursed child, but like it's identified as a cursed child because like it's forbidden for these two to meet. Like this thing's here, and like it's the child is symbolic that like the war is useless because it's like we're fighting a war that has no purpose. You're fighting a war from like the old guard. So and the whole point of the series is to kill this child and this family because like neither governments really want either like the people know like this exists, that you can live in harmony with each other, that it is possible.
Well,
sorry, I don't mean.
I see sort of a mirroring effect between not just Romeo and Juliet, but also Homer's The Iliad.
Yeah, that's the next one.
The idea of that was love is a dangerous thing, that it can destroy an entire nation or an entire civilization. Yeah. And I mean, the actual story of Romeo and Juliet was a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old having a relationship that murdered 6 people. Yeah. And the love story between Helen of Troy and Prince Paris was, they basically destroyed the entire city of Troy, which was thriving and had been at peace for a significant period of time prior with Sparta. And
we all threw it away because of love.
Don't fall in love with the wrong person. Yeah. Is basically, or don't fall in love at all. But that is a lot of drama for especially that period of time. And the good thing with interesting thing with fairy tales is you could apply that to reality, but you could also turn any aspect of reality
into
a fairy tale. Like there's a myth behind the Battle of Troy. Prince Paris was given the power to choose who would be the god of beauty.
Yeah, I remember.
And Aphrodite bribed him into giving Paris the power to seduce Helen of Troy. And that's crazy.
Would you say instead of running parallel, they run perpendicular to each other? Comics and mythology?
In the sense that they can have their intersect. They can cross paths, especially since you look at Marvel Comics. They integrate a lot of early mythology.
Yeah, Norse,
Thor, obviously. You even have more obscure heroes like Cuchulainn.
Yeah.
Who basically nobody listening to this is probably knows who that is. He was a Celtic hero, and the trials that he went through were very interesting. One of them was he had to chop off an ogre's head. The ogre would leave, and then the next day the ogre would come back and chop off Cuchulainn's head. The 2 people that won prior, they didn't return. Cuchulainn did. He was humble enough to follow that sort of destiny. And guess what? He lived after getting his head chopped off.
Wow. Can't say that every day.
Yeah. I mean, that must have been an interesting week.
Yeah. So you have any final thoughts, Mike?
Off the top of my head, no.
Yeah? All right. Well, everyone, that was another episode of The Grand Chancellor with Mike.
There you go.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Thank you, Mike, for coming in today. Thank you for another great episode of The Grand Chancellor. Tune in next week for another episode. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too.